most plastics do not get recycled, and I can explain why. So if they don't get recycled, they either are loose in the environment and get into the water, or they're landfilled, or they're burned at garbage incinerators, because the plastic recycling rate is only 5 to 6%. So I want all of your listeners to keep recycling your paper, cardboard, metal, glass. Please compost your yard waste and food waste. Keep that waste stream clean, just yard waste and food waste. But when it comes to plastic recycling has been an abysmal failure.
Welcome to Care More, Be Better, a podcast for people like you who care about the social impact of conscious companies and everyday heroes. Hear inspiring stories from those who put people and planet before profit and personal gain. You'll learn how you can make a difference, vote with your dollars, and get involved today. Here's your host, Corinna Bellizzi.
Welcome to Care More, Be Better, a podcast that shines a light on people and projects that are working to regenerate our planet and create a better future for all. I'm your host, Corinna Bellizzi. Today, we're taking on one of the most urgent and far-reaching environmental and public health crises of our time, plastic. It's in our water, our food, our clothing, our homes, and even in our bodies. And while corporations have spent decades telling us it's our fault, the truth is that the crisis was engineered by industries driven to sell more and more plastic, no matter the cost. Our guest today has been fighting back fiercely and effectively for decades. Judith Enck is the founder and president of Biodegradable, an organization dedicated to eliminating plastic pollution everywhere. She is a former EPA regional administrator appointed by President Obama, a longtime environmental policy leader, and now a professor at Bennington College. She is also the co-author of a powerful new book, The Problem with Plastic: How We Can Save Ourselves and Our Planet Before It's Too Late. This is written with Adam Mahoney. It poses the truth about plastic's life cycle, its toxic impacts, and importantly, the solutions that can help us turn off the plastic tap. Judith, welcome to Care More, Be Better. It's truly an honor to have you here.
Oh, it's my honor to join you. Thank you so much.
You've dedicated so much of your career to environmental protection and public policy. I'd love for you to share what inspired you to found Biodegradable and make this issue your central focus.
Well, I have spent my whole career working on environmental protection issues. It wasn't something I planned to do. I was going to go to social work school or law school, and then along the way got the bug when I was a student intern with New York Public Interest Research Group, NYPIRG, and helped pass New York's bottle bill, the refundable container deposit law. So I've been a solid waste gal for a long time. I care a lot about waste issues because it's just not sustainable, the rate in which our society is gobbling up natural resources and energy. So I've been inside government, outside government. One day I'm sitting at my desk at the Environmental Protection Agency where I served as regional administrator. My favorite part of the day was after 5 o'clock when all the meetings ended, people went home, and I could sit with a cup of tea and read what was on my desk and talk to people. In one moment, I read a scientific article about the massive amount of plastic going into the ocean. Today, it's about 2 garbage trucks filled going into the ocean every minute, as we profile in the book. And that just stopped me in my tracks because I know how vitally important our ocean is. It's a major source of protein for most of the world. It is our marine ecosystem. And it got me curious about the plastic pollution crisis. I mean, I knew it was a problem. I just didn't appreciate how serious it was. So at that moment, I decided when I was leaving the EPA, when the president left, that's the good thing about being a presidential appointee. You know when your last day on the job is. I decided I was going to work full-time on plastics. I just didn't know how or where.
Wow. I'm just thinking about a garbage truck full every half minute.
Yeah.
I mean,
yes. And what happens is when the plastic gets into the ocean, and most of it is from the land. At first, I'm like, are these, ocean-going vehicles that are ships that are illegally dumping? Well, there's some of that going on, but it's when you're walking down the street in your community and somehow a plastic bag or a plastic bottle gets away from you, goes into a storm sewer. That storm sewer goes into a stream or a river and then eventually the ocean. It gets worse. When it gets out into the ocean, if it's exposed to sunlight, it gets brittle. And then the waves in the ocean are almost like a paper shredder. So one plastic water bottle can become hundreds and then thousands of pieces of little plastic known as microplastics. And those little microplastics and nanoplastics are actually a greater risk than the fully intact plastic water bottle.
I think about the fact that they end up in the fish we consume and more. I mean, we see challenges of even whales washing up ashore, and guess what? Their digestive tract got, clogged with plastic bags and other debris that were not food. And unlike us, they can't just go visit their local doctor and get a surgery. This is life-ending for animals too. Wow. Okay. Your book opens with a very powerful story about East Palestine, Ohio, and the toxic chemicals involved in plastic production. Because the problem isn't just plastic, it's how we produce them, right? Before anything is even manufactured, what do most people still misunderstand about this plastic crisis and where it truly begins?
Well, it begins in Louisiana and Texas and Appalachia, where chemicals and fossil fuels are brought together to make plastic. So historically, plastics were made from chemicals and oil. Today, it's made from 16,000 different chemicals and mostly ethane, which is a byproduct of hydrofracking. And the reason we have so much plastic in our lives is not because we raised our hands and said we'd like more plastic, please. It's because there's a glut of gas, fracked gas on the market. So they're using waste gas to create new plastics. So you have to go to the very beginning of the process. There's a stretch of the Mississippi River between Baton Rouge and New Orleans known as Cancer Alley. And that's where a huge amount of plastic is produced and where there are very high cancer and other illness rates. That's why it's called Cancer Alley. Similar problems in Texas, Port Arthur, Texas, an area known as the Houston Ship Channel, and then also Appalachia. And so that's why we actually dedicate the book to people living in those frontline communities, because plastic is poisoning them every day. These are typically low-income communities and/or communities of color. This used to be called environmental racism. It's been sanitized a bit, and these are called environmental justice communities. But this is a prime example of environmental racism. So you start at the very beginning, and it's an environmental justice issue. Then you look at the very end of the plastic life cycle. Most plastics do not get recycled, and I can explain why. So if they don't get recycled, they either are loose in the environment and get into the water, or they're landfilled, or they're burned at garbage incinerators, because the plastic recycling rate is only 5 to 6%. So I want all of your listeners to keep recycling your paper, cardboard, metal, glass. Please compost your yard waste and food waste. Keep that waste stream clean, just yard waste and food waste. But when it comes to plastic recycling has been an abysmal failure. By design, most plastics are not recyclable. And the people who know that the best are little mom and pop companies like ExxonMobil, the largest maker of plastic in the United States. So the plastic industry knows that their products are not recyclable, and yet they've been deceiving the public for decades, making us think that we can toss so much of our single-use plastics into the recycling bin and it magically goes away.
You argue that plastic is poison to our bodies, to our communities, and our climate. How is it that the public narrative has still fallen as short as it has?
Well, it's because the plastics industry, and when I say plastics industry, it's fossil fuel companies, chemical companies, plastic producers, consumer brand companies that use a lot of plastics. They have deceived the public for decades. They know that plastics are not recyclable, and yet they've spent millions of dollars trying to convince the public that we just have to recycle more plastics. The deception is so serious that the California Attorney General, Rob Bonta, sued ExxonMobil in September of 2024 for their deceptive statements about plastics recycling and the plastics industry's latest false solution, which is chemical recycling. So I really was so informed by the legal complaint by Attorney General Bonta. It reads like a novel. It can almost be a movie. It is a story of deception and purposely spending millions on advertising to trick the public into thinking that plastic recycling works when the industry full well knows that it does not.
So, some stark statistics to share. One is that plastic production is expected to triple by 2060. What does that trajectory mean for human health and climate if nothing changes?
Well, it means more people are going to get sick if they live near plastic production facilities. It means you and I, even if we don't live in the Gulf South, will have more microplastics in our bodies. And it also means the climate crisis will get worse. And I've seen the projections and the charts, and I believe in my heart that we can change the trajectory. People want less plastic in their lives, and there are alternatives. We can shift to a reuse, refill economy. We can get companies just to stop using so much plastic. And then for things that have to be packaged, we can shift to paper, cardboard, metal, glass. All of those materials can be made from recycled material, and then they are easily recyclable. So some of your listeners might remember that old movie, The Graduate, with Dustin Hoffman, and an older gentleman turns to him and says, "The future is plastic." Imagine if he said the future is reusables and returnables. We've been trying to track down Dustin Hoffman to do a different public service announcement on plastic. I don't think the future is plastic. I think where we are on this issue is where the public was on the tobacco issue maybe 25 years ago, when the cigarette companies were saying, don't worry about secondhand smoke. Well, we've got really significant health concerns with plastics, and it is coming front and center in a way that has never have before.
I was just reminded of a story from my youth. Apparently, I played with one of Dustin Hoffman's children. I don't know if he has more than one, actually, as a young kid in San Francisco visiting one of my dad's best friends because he lived in the area, and we're just in a local park. And what do you know? My dad's sitting there making small talk with Dustin Hoffman as I played with his kid.
That's a great story. Let's find the kid and find the father.
Yeah, let's put the ethos out there into the world, the word out, and also just this idea that he could be leveraged to create some piece that, would harken back to that earlier very famous movie. I think that's amazing.
I actually think Tootsie is a much better role for him.
That was also a great movie. Gosh, now you have me thinking I need to get my 1980s arsenal of films. Now, I'd like to talk about who's really responsible for these challenges, and you've already pointed to fossil fuel and chemical companies. These industries have massive lobbying unions, and that, of course, affects politics and affects regulations and affects decisions that get made about who gets to become more wealthy. It affects things like why Coca-Cola continues to produce most of their products in plastic bottles. And so we know there are other alternatives out there today, and we know we can do better. One of the book's central messages is that the plastics industry deliberately convinced Americans that pollution was an individual problem, a litter bug problem. Why is it so important for people to understand the history of this? And how can we do better?
Well, there are things we can do as individuals to reduce our exposure to plastics, but quite honestly, we cannot shop our way out of the problem, no matter how careful you are. I mean, I try to avoid plastic, but when I go to the supermarket, I buy things in plastic because sometimes there's not alternatives, no matter how hard you try. So this is really a fossil fuel chemical industry love story. And most of the big fossil fuel companies have now shifted to plastic production. Because think about fossil fuels. Their big market in the US has been transportation, so filling up cars and trucks with gasoline. That's changing as we see more and more electric vehicles. Their other big market is electricity production. And we're finally getting serious about energy efficiency and renewables like wind, solar, geothermal, etc. So the big guns at Exxon and Shell know that their market is shrinking. And so a number of years ago, they decided to shift to plastic production. So none of us had any input into this, but this is a shift going on in our economy. The way we address this is certainly through some personal choice to avoid our own exposure to microplastics, but also we need systemic change. I'm a former federal regulator, so what I mean by that is we need new laws and strong enforcement of those laws. So for instance, in New York State, my organization Beyond Plastics and others are working on a comprehensive bill to reduce single-use packaging. It's known as the Packaging Reduction and Recycling Infrastructure Act. It requires all single-use packaging to be reduced by a mere 30% over 12 years. It also bans the 16 most toxic chemicals used in packaging. I don't know about you, but I do not want PFAS chemicals, lead, cadmium, formaldehyde in my food packaging. It is today. Third, the bill puts a modest fee on packaging, and that money is to be invested in local waste reduction and recycling programs. For instance, I would love to see every school start using real reusable dishes rather than single-use plastics that our children are eating breakfast and lunch off of. To do that, we're going to need funding to install dishwashing equipment. That can come from these new fees on packaging. And then finally, the bill has a strong definition of recycling, so it doesn't allow for polluting chemical recycling to count as real recycling. So the good news is there's a big coalition in New York working to pass the bill. It passed the New York State Senate 2 years in a row, died on the Assembly floor. And the reason is not due to science, it's due to political science. We issued a report in October that found that 107 registered businesses lobbying against this bill and only 23 lobbyists in support. And these are very influential lobbyists. It's amazing we got as far as we did, but we have a policy agenda to reduce the generation and use of plastic that is going to protect public health and also save tax dollars. We haven't talked about that, but when companies put products out on the market, they have no skin in the game in terms of paying for proper reuse, recycle, or landfill or incineration. They just sell it and they wash their hands of it. And you and me as taxpayers get stuck getting rid of all of this packaging. So fiscal conservatives should love policies like this because it will save tax dollars.
I have had the joy of traveling much over the United States and then, of course, internationally as well. And I spent a fair amount of time in Germany. And one of the things I loved about my time there was that recycling is just a way of life and that reuse is a way of life. So, for instance, if you go to the local market and you get your bottles of soda water, they're mostly in glass, right? And then you return the glass bottles the next time you come through, which then get refilled. And the same is true of most of their things like even shampoo containers and things like that. So we don't see the same amount of waste from packaging in an environment like that. And they're very sophisticated about where you put which types of recyclables at curb so that they can actually be recycled properly without a lot of extra manual labor on the part of individuals at the processing plants. Now, I've seen us walk back some of these programs, like for instance, in San Jose, California now, in my mother-in-law's neck of the woods, they just took away their recycling bins. They said, put everything in the trash now. And that they're going to be processing them somehow at...
Yeah,
I don't see
it doesn't work. They try to pull out the recyclables with the mixed garbage, and it's too dirty, and it doesn't work, and that's a big mistake.
I completely agree. I mean, I just knew thinking about it, having visited recycling centers. And yes, recycling centers end up with the wish cycling additions to the bins and things like that that have to be sorted out. But certainly, it's a much cleaner process than just putting everything in the same bin.
Oh, absolutely. That would be illegal in New York State. Some waste haulers tried to get that through a number of years ago. Recyclables go to a material recovery facility, or a MRF, where they're sorted. And we call those dirty MRFs. And you get very little clean material. The key to recycling is you have to keep everything source separated and clean. And Germany does so well, not because of the commitment of the German people, but also there are laws on the books that are very prescriptive on waste reduction and recycling, and we need to mimic them here in the United States, most likely at the state level. I don't see Congress doing much to particularly help.
Well, and then people are financially incentivized as well because you pay a redemption value every time you buy a product in that glass that is reusable. If you don't return it, then you'd never get that money back.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so it's a direct off the bill issue. So like, for instance, when I buy our milk for our home in glass jars, I pay an extra, I think it's $3 for the bottle. I'm sure the bottle costs more than that, but that's what they've said the fee is. So you're paying that extra amount. And then when you bring it back, that $3 comes off your next grocery bill. So that financial incentive really supports the recycling initiative. The same is true in states like Oregon, where they still have a redemption value on things like aluminum cans, which in California have been removed to the point where it's almost just by weight, right? So the incentive is dramatically less. But even cans have a plastic liner in them. So I was hoping you could help clarify for me and for my audience, what materials we should really be going to and where the risks still lie with those materials. Like even an aluminum can, which is supposedly infinitely recyclable, that has that plastic liner, what happens when it's incinerated? How do we ensure that, we're not further damaging the environment?
Well, aluminum cans do have a plastic liner with a chemical called BPA, which is an endocrine disrupting chemical. And for years, the industry has been saying they're going to get rid of that liner, and they still haven't. You can still recycle the aluminum can over and over again. And the good thing is that the old aluminum can becomes a new aluminum can, as opposed to with plastic, the limited amount of recycling that happens is a plastic soda bottle or milk jug will become plastic lumber, which actually creates a whole new host of problems when that lumber flakes in the sun and creates microplastics. But I think there are some sensible small steps we can take. For instance, never put plastic in the microwave. Never, ever, ever. Try to avoid black plastic utensils in your kitchen. The black plastic is typically made from recycled electronic waste, which contains toxic chemicals. I always try to bring a refillable coffee mug to the coffee shop. I personally think glass and metal are, stainless steel are the best option. I'm really big on stainless steel tiffins. These are little containers you can use for takeout food. Of course, it's stainless steel, so don't put it in the microwave. But, we can scrape it out, microwave our food, and then clean it. I recently got a steel cutting board because, I never had a plastic cutting board. But get rid of your plastic cutting board if you have one, because you don't want little pieces of microplastics along with your tofu. So the book, actually, The Problem with Plastic, has some helpful tips on things that we can do as individuals. And then we not so subtly push people into the political arena. And when I say that, I mean that in a nonpartisan way. Just show up at your city council meeting and show up at your county legislature and see what they can do working with your community to reduce plastics. There are 10 states that have now banned plastic bags. There are a number of states that have banned polystyrene food foam packaging.
Styrofoam, for those
Styro-
that don't know.
yeah, Styrofoam is the brand name by Dow. So I tried not to say
Yeah.
Styrofoam, but that is exactly what it is. There are a bunch of local laws sweeping the country called Skip the Stuff. So, when you order takeout food and you say, I don't need the plastic utensils or the mountain of napkins or the straws, and you get it anyway. So we are supporting local laws that the restaurant does not put any of that into your takeout bag unless you affirmatively ask for it. There are so many policy steps, and at Beyond Plastics, we have a network. We have local groups that we work with. We have local Beyond Plastic groups. 3 people or more can form one, and we try to climb the ladder. Start with, how do you reduce plastic in your own life? You're never going to get rid of all of it, but the more you do, the better. Then look at your school, look at your faith community, look at your civic organization, and then your city hall, and then your county legislature. And before you know it, you're with us in the state legislature passing really great bills. And that's how we change the trajectory of so much plastic that is projected to be produced in our country.
I see creative things happening in my local environment, as for instance, even at the Hop and Barley Festival, which is, just obviously it's like a brewer's feast in a way. But it's at a local park, and when you come in, part of your entry fee covers a stainless steel, and that's what you use at each of the stations to enjoy your of beer, however many you choose to have throughout the day. So there's literally no plastics. Also seen marathons that are using some reusable containers and then collecting them, because usually people will drink and then dispose of right there because they're running. Okay. And then you have a cleanup crew that will address that. And there's also this Beyond PLA, I think is what it's called, the no plastic, but made from algae.
Yes, I just met the seaweed. I just met the founder of that company. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so just thinking about some of the innovations are coming about because of this, where they're even saying things like, I know from a PR perspective, they hosted a scotch tasting in these plastic little pouches, and literally you'd put the thing in your mouth, or you'd like tear a little hole in it and drink it, and then you could go ahead and eat the container because it's completely made from algae, seaweed, right? Now, we need more of these innovations, and we need to help them mainstream. What do you see as being that role in part of this particular issue?
Well, I think innovation is key, especially as the public learns that we have microplastics in virtually every part of our body, right? Scientists have found microplastics in our kidney, lungs, our bloodstream, breast milk, heart arteries, the human placenta, both the fetal side and the maternal side, which really worries me because the preterm baby is only hanging out for 7, 8, 9 months and is already exposed to microplastics. And then recent studies showing microplastics that have crossed the blood-brain barrier. So scientists, engineers, innovators, venture capital people are all reading these same studies. And we need innovation for sure. But what's going to drive it is new laws that require these solutions to scale up. We have solutions. There are alternatives to plastic. But I'm reminded of fuel efficiency standards for cars. the Congress passed the Clean Air Act, and my old agency, the EPA, did some very important rules that said we needed more fuel-efficient cars. That saves us all money, and that's what gave birth to the electric car industry. So we need that kind of innovation in the plastics arena.
Now, you've mentioned a couple of times things like the challenges with recycling and chemical recycling. I had Paul Hawken on who talked about technologies that were being created that could potentially make old plastics like new. And I don't understand what those things are, but I wondered if it was the chemical recycling that you're referring to and what some of the challenges are of that to help us understand when we do confront people talking about things like chemical recycling. So, how is it not the shiny new fix?
Yeah, well, it's not new. The industry calls it advanced recycling. It's not advanced. It's not recycling. They've been trying it since the 1980s. In fact, one of these facilities was built at Walt Disneyland in Florida with a lot of money from the Federal Department of Energy. It didn't work and shut down pretty quickly. So what chemical recycling is, or advanced recycling, is you collect a whole bunch of different types of waste plastic, you heat it at a really high temperature, and you create something called pyrolysis oil. It's a low-grade dirty oil. The last thing we need. There is one facility that is working to create waste plastic into new plastic. I would also argue the last thing we need is more plastic. So this is very much a talking point for the plastics industry. When we show up in legislative bodies and say we need to pass bills to reduce plastic, the industry lobbyists show up and say, no, we have chemical recycling. So 2 years ago, Beyond Plastics took a very close look at chemical recycling because it's all we heard about in the halls of power. There were only 11 operating facilities in the whole country. And since we published our report, 3 have shut down. A number have declared bankruptcy. And so even if these plants were working at full capacity, they'd only be handling about 1% of plastic waste in the country. So it's not a solution, but it's a distraction to the real need to reduce the amount of plastic that is being made in our country. Reduction, reuse, refill is the future, but we're only going to get there if we have new laws that require that. The industry has had decades to be innovative and reduce their use of plastic, and they're going in the entirely opposite direction.
How can people recognize these false solutions when they see them?
Well, it's hard because just like the plastics industry has spent millions of dollars trying to convince people that we can recycle our way out of the problem, they spend a lot of money with PR firms and lobbyists confusing policymakers and the general public. So I just always urge everyone to do their own research. I think environmental groups are a credible source of information. We don't have any financial interest in the outcome of this. We just care about clean oceans and not having microplastics in breast milk. So, look at the research done by Natural Resources Defense Council, look at Oceana, look at Beyond Plastics. And the information is often very, very different than what you hear from advertising. And then, quite honestly, that's one reason why we wrote the book, The Problem with Plastic. I teach a class at Bennington College on plastics, which we teach on Zoom. So it's open to community people from all over the world. And I didn't have one book where everything lived. I just had a disastrous list of PDFs that the students would read for each class. And so one reason we wrote the book with my co-author, Adam Mahoney, and my colleagues at Beyond Plastic was to have everything in one place. And the book comes out December 2nd, and there's also all this new information that I'd want to put in the book, but it went to press a few months ago. This is a fast-moving issue, and people care about different parts of the issue. It's kind of interesting. Some people are drawn to this issue because of climate change, some because of health, some because of environmental justice, some because of the ocean, some because they're really annoyed that the plastics industry has lied to them about recycling. What's so fascinating to me is most of the leaders in this movement against plastic are women. In my class, which is Bennington undergraduate students, some high school students, and auditors from around the country, every single class that I teach every semester, 90% are women. The advocates that we work with at the local level are mostly women. The legislators that are engaged are mostly women. So that's why in the book, we profile 10 women who are leading the charge in their communities. And I'm just fascinated by this and why it is that women are leading the charge for change.
I have my own theories.
So do I. Just letting that out there.
I think we could probably have an hour-long conversation about that alone. And I'd love to welcome you back to have it. Like, why are women the activists surrounding the problems related to plastic pollution? Let's make an episode. Let's come back and do that.
That's my next book.
I would love to have that conversation. But today, I will just say, I believe the primary reason is that women, we are the guardians of the next generation. And that's because we get pregnant, we have the babies, we experience life in a different way than men do.
I agree with that. And I also don't want to let men off the hook because they have to be part of the solution. They can't leave it to women to, go around with the dustbin and the broom and clean up a generation of toxic messes all over the world.
Well, I have been talking to my husband about the issue of plastic pollution for the better part of our marriage. Okay. We've been together almost 20 years. 20 years this July and this coming July. And what did it take for him? He listened to a podcast episode on NPR that was not mine, of course, because I'm not an NPR podcaster. And then came to me and started talking about the problem with microplastics and wanting to use less of it. I'm like, I have been telling you about this for so long. But you couldn't hear it from me. You had to hear it from a male scientist perspective.
And on the issue of microplastics and how it may affect his body, right? I have a similar story that might knock you off the air, but we would talk a lot about microplastics in breast milk and the human placenta. And then recently there was a new study on microplastic in testicles, and suddenly male legislators listened much more closely than they had previously.
Well, and relationality to sperm count, because it is an endocrine disruptor as well, right? So we'll get RFK Jr. talking about that in short order, because he's already telling people that 65-year-old men have a higher sperm count than teenage boys, which I don't know what science he's really looking at, but it's there. It's in media, right? What's the reason behind the reason? Let's talk about that. Perhaps he should get Coca-Cola to stop using plastic bottles. That would be one step in the right direction.
That would be so helpful, RFK Jr.
Maybe he's listening, but we'll put it out there into the atmosphere. All right. I want to talk about how we can really help people understand things like biodegradable and compostable as it relates to plastic, because one of the innovations I have been tracking in the supplements world, I'm in the supplements world, right? I've been continually pushing people to aluminum or glass or, wood, cardboard, any sort of packaging that they could possibly go to preserve the safety of the product that isn't plastic for some time. The aluminum bottles already have that liner. We know that. We're getting endocrine disruptors with that. That's not ideal. So glass is better. Glass usually comes with a plastic lid. That's not great. How can we move away? Now, there have been some that are innovating solutions that are supposedly plastic that is built to be biodegradable or a bioplastic. I'd like for you to offer your perspective on which of these solutions is actually feasible, if any, and What's the truth behind biodegradable and what's the truth behind compostable plastics?
Well, we issued a report on this about 2 years ago because we're also really curious and we get this question a lot. I'd start by saying that there's no such thing as biodegradable plastic. A lot of these products are indeed fiber-based, and I've been waiting for this breakthrough my whole life, longer than your marriage. I have been wanting to see a real biodegradable material that holds up and has good functionality and has a good price point. There are some good examples. For instance, mycelium, a mushroom-based packaging. There's a company in upstate New York that would make it from agricultural waste. It's also interesting to see some innovation with seaweed. But what you have to be really mindful of on biodegradable packaging is two things. One is some of them have more chemicals than conventional plastic. So you need to ask about the chemical additives. And then second, most of them will only be compostable if they go to a high temperature commercial composting operation. And most communities do not have one of those. So a lot of the so-called compostable plastics actually just wind up in the landfill or the garbage incinerator. I don't put any of this stuff in my backyard compost bin because we use our compost to grow vegetables. And even if something kind of passes my very strict standards, I'm not putting it in my compost bin. The thing about composting is it works beautifully if it's yard waste and food waste. You keep it to those two inputs. And then you have this marvelous soil amendment, which increases soil health and also is a carbon sink. There was a project called the Marin Carbon Project in Northern California that I visited when I was at the EPA. And boy, do they have a good operation there, and they documented the climate change, the carbon sink benefits of using clean compost. So once you start adding things like Starbucks coffee cups and so-called biodegradable utensils, you're really challenging the composting system. And I think a lot of local governments, especially in California, are making a mistake by allowing packaging into composting. I was recently at a family member's visiting, and I'm in their kitchen, and they're wonderfully committed to the environment with solar and an electric vehicle. And I opened their compost bin and I gasped because I saw a Starbucks cup in it. And my relative showed me the form from the local government saying, yes, you can put that in your compost bin. So I don't think most biodegradable plastics are ready for prime time yet. And the key thing is to make them without toxic additives.
There was a story told in a podcast interview I hosted, I believe it was last year, with Mark Easter, who wrote The Blue Plate, which was basically a book on how to eat regeneratively. And one of the things he did was visit a few orchards, different farmers farming food and things along those lines. And one of the orchards he visited was using compost in their field that they got from a commercial composter. And one of the things that they saw come through was all the plastic labels from the plastic fruit, right? So it's like just the labels that goes on every single apple and every single banana is not paper. It's made of plastic, or it's got an adhesive that is basically a plastic, or it's lined in some way with some sort of plastic. And so he was like basically kicking the dirt, pissed off, because here he is trying to put organic compost on his field to grow his orchard. And he has all these bits of plastic that have been introduced.
It's terrible. The Washington Environmental Agency just put out a report on these labels, and their recommendation is to use paper-based compostable labels. I think that's better than the plastic labels. I have a sad story of we organized a big event, and we're composting banana peels and apples, and I can't tell you how long I sat with a compost bin taking the labels off of like 100 bananas.
I do that now. Now that I know about this story, I do that now. I didn't always do it. Or the plastic ends that are on the ends of the banana that holds the bunch together, that piece has to go in the trash too.
Yeah, absolutely. And why do they sell hands of bananas in plastic bags? Like, that's the most ridiculous thing I see in supermarkets, an example of pointless plastic, because bananas come in their own natural packaging. But it's kind
Yeah,
of,
I had the same argument about things like pomegranates, like the Palm Wonderful selling the kernels of pomegranate. I saw in a Whole Foods an orange that had been peeled inside a plastic cup that they were selling. I have seen, I don't know, the hard-boiled egg example also kind of ticks me off, like peeling it and then putting it in plastic. These things are in a perfect package already. Let it stay in its perfect natural package. The argument that came back at me when I brought this up was one of accessibility. So you have somebody who has a physical disability that's unable to peel the orange or unable to, take care of the pomegranate. But let's be real. That is the rare exception. The fact is that companies are profiteering off these natural products by making it more convenient and putting it in a different package. But they're also, in doing this, taking away some of the joy of uncovering that fruit. And I feel like that is something that is also important to preserve. Bursting, open a pomegranate is an experience. It's part of the joy of the fruit.
it's because so many of these companies have no financial connection to what happens with all of this plastic when the consumer is done with it. And we have to change that paradigm with new laws, or it's just going to get worse.
So you share in the book, the only real solution is to produce less plastic.
Yeah.
And the only way to get there is to change things through legislation.
Legislation and getting more people involved in democracy and talking to businesses, but recognizing that many, many businesses do not change just because we send them a whole bunch of letters or send them a petition. I mean, I don't mean to be discouraging about that. Our voices as consumers are important, but New York State, for instance, 9 other states banned plastic bags. And now many people use reusable bags. I mean, that one act has really reduced the amount of plastic that is produced in Louisiana, Texas, Appalachia, and loose in our environment. I mean, every spring you see so many plastic bags up in the trees. That's a really bad sign. So I think really smart people entering the political arena and thinking about their kids and their grandkids and what kind of earth we're leaving for them and what are we doing to their health with the microplastic concern. I think we are seeing a shift, and the cover of our book is an iceberg, and underneath the iceberg is a single-use plastic bag. This is the tip of the iceberg. I might also say the cover of the book does not have any plastic on it. We're really grateful to our publishers at the New Press. They went out of their way to find a plastic-free cover and said that all their future books will have plastic-free covers. So those sort of steps, really make a difference. We all have a role to play.
I love that story. I love the consistency. I love that it comes together in support of the message that the book contains. So that's amazing. Now, you quote Mariame Kaba as hope is a discipline. And I wanted to talk about this because I think we need to work to retain hope. And the concept of hope as being a discipline, I think, encapsulates that. So I'd love to know from you, in the face of such an overwhelming crisis as we are in with the plastic pandemic, how do we practice that discipline?
Well, by working with others in community to affect change. When people call me and they have concerns and I ask them, well, are you part of a local group? No, I don't have time for that. And I say, you're not going to get anything done if you're working alone. So find your partners in your community and just roll up your sleeves and start. The thing about the plastics issue is you can start anywhere. You can screen a local film. One I highly recommend is The Story of Plastic, put out by the NGO, The Story of Stuff. we're featuring an organization that's one of our affiliates in our monthly newsletter tomorrow. They went to a local hardware store and the manager let them do a big display about plastic, this gigantic window on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. School kids working with their parents to get polystyrene or styrofoam out of their school cafeterias. There's a wonderful organization called Cafeteria Culture out of New York City that works with low-income school districts in New York City. They have a great movie called Microplastic Madness. And I am getting to answer your question. Whenever I'm feeling a little blue about the formidable odds that we're up against, I watch the trailer for the movie Microplastic Madness, put out by Cafeteria Culture. Their founder is a woman we profile in the book, Debbie Lee Cohen, who is extraordinary and sadly died of cancer last year. And you see these kids like really paying attention. Debbie Lee Cohen has planted these ideas and this inspiration with these elementary school students. And what really gives me hope is, working for the future for these kids and future generations. We just cannot leave them an ocean that is choking with plastics. We cannot let children growing up in Cancer Alley having asthma attacks and high lead levels in their bloods because we can't chop up plastic anymore at supermarkets. There are alternatives and people are getting involved. And I think that is what gives us all hope.
Wow. So how do people find out if there's already a Beyond Plastics community in their neck of the woods? I'd love for you to direct us to that. And then if you can offer a comment on what it takes to found one. You said you need 3 members. How do you do it?
So folks can just go to beyondplastics.org and you can see if there's a local Beyond Plastics group or an affiliate. If you're part of an existing group, don't start a new one. Just become an affiliate to get our information. We do webinars, we train people. So just go to our website, beyondplastics.org. There's a map. We just started the local groups and affiliates a couple years ago. We already have 185. And then if you want to start a local group, we'll hold your hand through the process. First, we're going to ask you to find at least 2 other people. If you can't find 2 other people, sorry to say, you might not be a great organizer. So find 2 other people. You don't have to be related to them and start, a local group. We have Beyond Plastics Brooklyn. We have Beyond Plastics Greater Boston. We'd love to see more in the South, in the Midwest. I think we're in about 38 states now. And we have a wonderful staff person who guides people. And we have ideas on what you can do locally, and we offer support, how to get your story out in the media, how to write a letter to the editor, how do you pass a resolution in your local city council. A lot of this is also democracy building and just getting people into the political arena. And everyone is a volunteer with the local groups and affiliates, so people do as little or as much as they want.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that context. Now, for listeners feeling overwhelmed, is there one action that you most want them to take after hearing our conversation today?
I want them to register to vote and talk to all of their elected officials and ask them, what are you specifically doing to reduce plastics? What are you doing in our city, in our county, in our state? And if you bump in a member of Congress, first give them a hug because they've got a tough life these days in Congress. It's so dysfunctional. And then kindly say to them, okay, buck up. Let's pass the Break Free from Plastic Pollution Act in Congress. Let's pass a national bottle bill. If you need ideas, environmental groups have ideas for you. But yes, bring your refillable coffee mug every time you go to the coffee shop. But more important, get in the political arena with us. We have no shortage of ideas. What we need is more people getting involved. It could be an hour a week. It could be 5 hours every month. People are busy, but a little bit goes a pretty long way. So Also, you can sign up for the free Beyond Plastics email on our website, and we will send out petitions from time to time. We're urging Home Depot, for instance, with our friends at Toxic Free Future, to stop using so much PVC plastic in home building products. We are asking clothing companies to stop using so much polyester. I think a lot of people don't realize most of our clothes are plastic. This is a concern, especially for little ones. So we often have a call to action, and we make it pretty easy for people to jump in.
Polyester, PVC, there are many other names to plastics that are included in our clothing. I wonder, if you're supporting something as a replacement for the PVC pipes in your plumbing, what do you recommend? If you're supporting a replacement for some of the plastics in our clothing, what do you recommend?
Well, PVC pipes, especially for drinking water, are a major problem, and we recommend copper or stainless steel piping. And a lot of communities are finally removing their lead pipes. It's called lead service lines. It's the pipes that go from the street to the house. And if you're in one of those cities, you got to get in there early and make sure they're not purchasing PVC pipe for the replacement. And clothing is hard. Wool, cotton, linen. I make sure our bed sheets are cotton. So, you do what you can. There's a woman who is...
Microfiber is another word for plastic, right?
Yes. And it also, and it comes out in the laundry. When you do laundry, there's a lot of microplastics that are emitted in the wastewater and also the dryer. There's a woman, and I'm embarrassed, I can't remember her name. She's the zero waste chef. And she said, we don't need a small number of people doing zero waste perfectly. We need a large number of people doing zero waste imperfectly. So we don't have to be hard on ourselves. We do the best we can, but reducing your exposure for plastics is not only good for the planet, it's also good for your own health and your family's health.
Most people, I think about things like plastic water bottles. I went ahead and replaced that, right? The plastic utensils that you mentioned. Carry bamboo as utensils instead. They sell them with a cute little carabiner you can put on your purse or your backpack or whatever. So some of these solutions are small fixes, but they add up. They really do add up. And I will say too that, even Patagonia, who sells a lot of polar fleeces, right? With their polar fleeces, they now give you a bag to wash it in and dry it in so that your microplastics don't end up in our wastewaters. So there are ways you can limit the exposure that ends up in the environment. It takes a bit of effort. And as you educate yourself, maybe you'll choose more things like wool, cotton, linen, and just take a step in the right direction. I really appreciate you and the work you're doing. I'm enjoying your book. I'm not through it completely, but I intend to finish it. And I do want to invite you back so that we can talk more about women activists who are standing up to the plastic problem. I will just thank you so much for joining me. Are there any other sparks that you want to share about things that are coming in the months ahead, other than your release date, December 2nd?
Yeah, December 2nd is The Problem with Plastic by the New Press. It's the perfect holiday gift. You can sit around your holiday decorations and say, oh, darling, look, did you read the chapter on microplastics in the human brain? But it is a good book to get into public libraries. We have quarterly webinars. We just did one that's on our website on toxic chemicals in plastics. We had two amazing scientists on that. I urge folks to watch that. And just sign up for our email list at beyondplastics.org to get our latest information. We're very low maintenance. We do a monthly newsletter that is emailed to you, and we only ask people to do things when it really matters. We're not like building our mailing list. We're just like, oh, this is really important. Let's pump some calls or letters into this elected official or this company. We realize people's time are short. The other thing I would say is there's so much going on in the world. And plastic may not be your top 3 issue, but put us in top 5 and consider financially supporting Beyond Plastics. We don't have a whole lot of money, and we're taking on the fossil fuel, the chemical, and the plastics industry all at the same time. So financial support at beyondplastics.org. I would say there are other issues that need your money before us, but put us in your top 5.
Well, Judith, thank you so much for joining me. I will be sure to add those quarterly webinars to my email list as well so that my followers get those alerts on a periodic basis. I truly appreciate the work you're doing, and I fully believe in it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Listeners, you can learn more at beyondplastics.org and find links to Judith's book and resources in our show notes. We also host a full blog and episode transcript for this episode at caremorebebetter.com, along with opportunities to support our new cause partner, Prescott College, and our broader regenerative mission. Stay tuned because in early December, I'll also be speaking with Dr. Chris DeArmit, author of Shattering the Plastics Illusion. Now, this discussion will offer a deep dive into the science and skepticism around plastics. I have to tell you, this will likely be a counterpoint, but one that may be a little bit of a fractious discussion because, again, I'm aligned with Judith in this. I think plastics are a problem. Now, thank you, listeners, now and always, for being a part of this pod and this community, because together we really can do so much more. We can care more. We can be better. We can even reduce our waste streams, create a better, more regenerative future for all of us and for the generations that come. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Care More, Be Better, a podcast for social good. To make sure you never miss an episode, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts, and share with your friends to help us reach more people and spread more social good.